Welcome. This is the Drupal usability meeting for October 21st, 2022. I am Benji Fisher, moderating and sharing my screen. And let me get the participants window open. The other people present are Aaron McHale, Afra Schall, Ralph Kohler, Simo Helston, and Thomas Howell. So thank you all for coming. As usual, I will try to keep an eye on the chat, and if you prefer to write something rather than speak up, I will read your comments into the record. Let me just get the window open so I can live up to that promise. There we go. And there's an issue that we got a request to review some time ago. It is project messaging channel in core as experimental. It is issue 3206643. And the idea is that some site owners are not active in the Drupal community, and we want some way to push important notifications to them. Perhaps security announcements, upcoming major releases of Drupal. We might want to tell them about DrupalCon and encourage them to come. I forget it. There may even have been a core initiative at some point to make this happen, but it's been developed as a contrib module. This is the issue to bring that contrib module into core. As you can see, most of the remaining tasks have been checked off. I should check this one off. That's no longer needed. But the user interface changes are to add a notification icon to the admin toolbar and an announcements tray with a list of the announcements pulled from the feed. And I've installed the module. I've actually been doing some work on it. Oh, and no, this is the wrong one. Where's the right one? Just a second. And I've actually made this available through ngrok, so you can also look at it. Yes, this is the version with HTTPS, and I will paste that into the chat if any of you want to try it out. As usual, the login credentials are admin. So the only change, whether the admin toolbar is open or not, is this item over near the right. Oh, is this? No, this is not from the quick edit module. This plans to stay. The edit link. So there's this new item in the admin toolbar. It has the text announcements and it has an icon. If there is an unread announcement, the icon shows with a little red dot to draw a little more attention to it. When you click either on the icon or on the link, a tray opens up. The title is Community Announcements. It has the title, date, and optionally a little new flag. Not sure about the contrast there, that red on black. I guess maybe it's okay. And for testing purposes, there is a live feed from Drupal.org with this one test announcement. I think it's marked as sticky or always new, just for testing purposes. And the announcement is project messaging soon to be available in Drupal core. That looks like a link. If I click on it, I go to this page on Drupal.org with the full announcement. And we might be going to a security announcement or blog post announcing the new major version of Drupal. For now, it's just this one test post. In the project announcements blog, I didn't know there was a project announcements blog. Any questions about what it's supposed to do? If anyone is trying to ask questions, you forgot to unmute yourself. Go ahead, offer.
Just to clarify, this is made for admins or like not for anonymous users. This is for the whoever maintained the site.
There is a permission associated to the module, and you can assign it as usual to any role you want. So you could assign the permission to the anonymous user role, but that would be unusual.
Yeah, I think as I understand it, the goal, because I think there was a way back an initiative idea she created, but the goal, as Benji kind of said originally, was to bring in people like site builders, occasional administrators, people who are building Drupal sites or administering Drupal sites, but are not, active in the community. So there's a kind of a way to reach that that's essentially the target audience. So yeah, not just regular anonymous or regular authenticated users, really the, people who are building sites, administering sites, people who might want to get more involved in the community.
Yeah, I think less the people who are building the sites, they presumably already know about Drupal, and more the people who are administering them.
Right, yeah. But that's our kind of target audience, I guess, is the, yeah.
Now, we did discuss this issue several months ago. Unfortunately, no one ever posted a comment summarizing that discussion. The recording is available, and I suppose I can track down which meeting it was. But the opinion at that point was that we would really rather have some sort of a dashboard that when you first log into the site, you go to a dashboard, and that would be a better place to put the announcements. We have, way back in Drupal 8.3, it's getting to be a few years ago now. There was all this work to redesign the status report. So remember back in before this, or in Drupal 7 still, it's just a table listing first the errors, and then the warnings, and then the notices with a bit of color coding. So we could have some sort of a dashboard, perhaps modeled on this. Maybe you could choose what blocks to put in it. And the announcements would be an option, perhaps a default option. So the consensus when we discussed this last time was that we should not go forward with the proposed solution. We should do something else. And I don't know whether we should stick with that recommendation, or whether we should say, let's go ahead with what's already implemented. This doesn't necessarily block doing something better in the future. Or maybe it does. What do you think? Ralph, go ahead.
Aaron was first. But...
Go ahead.
Okay. I think I agree in general that a dashboard solution is probably the better choice, but until something like that is implemented, the announcements solution here might be fine. The only suggestion I might have, in addition to the permissions, at the moment it's only set for administrators, but if, for example, the admin sets the permission also to, let's say, the content editors as well. And you have, let's say, 30 content editors, and for few of them, it's just plain noise, and they are not interested in it at all, and they have that announcements function anyway. It might be a good idea to provide some sort of opt-out inside the user profile so that the person is able to switch that functionality off, so they don't see the announcements, even so they have the permission for it.
Okay, that's an interesting suggestion. I don't think I've seen that before. And I know that Aaron raised his hand first, but I also want to give everyone a chance to talk, and Aaron has already spoken up, so I'm going to ask Thomas to go next.
Mine's going to be brief. I definitely prefer the dashboard. That menu across the top, generally I prefer it to be pretty sparse. And so adding the announcements is a pretty long string of letters for using it. And I'd be interested what it looks like mobile. But I also agree with Ralph that anything is better than nothing right now. And especially, like, I haven't looked at the numbers lately, but over the past year or so, I've been hearing anecdotally that we're seeing shrinkage in terms of community size for Drupal and the number of sites that are implementing Drupal. So getting people more involved and just making them aware seems to be like very, very urgent from my perspective. So I agree with both perspectives, but for me, the end state needs to be a dashboard. The announcements is noisy. Thank you.
Okay, well, let's just have a quick look at what happens if we simulate mobile. The word announcements goes away, and we have just the icon, which is the usual behavior for the admin toolbar. Aaron, go ahead. You've been waiting.
Thanks, Benji. Yeah, I guess you know, I would agree with what others have said, not only about, you know, just the dashboards, putting this in dashboard, but if we, you know, if we kept it like this, I like Ralph's idea of like having an opt-out kind of thing, even if you have the permission. I guess it's, so one of the things with someone said about there's a, you know, it being visual noise, particularly if it's not clear when there's a new announcement. So or if there's a new announcement, but then you know, this right now with the announcements has one new announcement, but what happens when, you know, is there any kind of change to that icon or change to that menu, you know, if there's no unread announcements? I'm guessing, like, I vaguely recall seeing some kind of red dot earlier next to the bell icon, so I don't know if you can confirm if that's the case, Benji, or not.
Let's say I can, since I opened a new tab, I can confirm. So yes, there is a red dot, which I guess is hard for you to discern.
Yeah, that wouldn't be particularly clear, I think, particularly with, you know, especially with the black background, it might not be obvious. But, you know, overall, I think, yeah, a dashboard probably makes more sense for something like this. And I guess because, you know, also, yeah, you might want the toolbar, as Thomas said, you might want the toolbar to have, you know, very specific sets of links, or, you know, be sparser than the one provided by default. So plus on the other thing is, like, if you see this all the time and you see, you know, a little red dot, and you just get used to seeing that, I imagine it'd be really easy for someone to just completely ignore this exists and never check it. And by putting them on a dashboard, we make the list of announcements much more visually apparent, because if you're going to the dashboard for other things, at least you'll see the list and you'll see if there's a new announcement. Whereas with this, you actively have to go and click on the announcements, and that's, you know, the only thing that brings you to that, you know, part of the sidebar. So yeah, I see Thomas has got a comment, so I'll hand over to him.
Just wanted to support about the fact that the red dot, something akin to that is used in the Discord UI, and it truly becomes noise. Because you can't keep up with the number of messages coming in, and I don't think we want to necessarily meter how fast announcements can come out. The behavior is I actually turn off notifications and I stop paying attention. I make the dot vanish because it's just annoying. And I know a lot of people who do that in Discord, so it's not an ideal like UI element from my perspective.
So I guess there seem to be two problems with the red dot. One is that it's too annoying, and one is that it is not apparent enough, especially if you have limited vision. Do we have any positive suggestions for other ways to make it clearer? Ralph?
Maybe an idea to either replace, in case a new announcement is coming in, replace the bell with just a circle with a number in it of, for example, 1 or 2 new announcements, or instead you could change the color of the bell and place, instead of a circle, use the bell outline and change the color, and within also the number might be an idea to stick with it. But I guess changing from the regular icon, you know, the outline, and if it changed to something circular, then the changing of the outline as well as the number as well as the color might give enough cues, and it's also bigger than that small tiny red dot, so it won't get unnoticed. That might be a way to communicate that there's something changed.
Okay, so to summarize, you have 2 suggestions. One would be simply to make the whole bell red rather than adding the red dot. And the second suggestion is to replace the bell with a circled number indicating the number of announcements. Have I got that right?
Or maybe even also for the bell with the changed color, also add a number inside the bell, like with the circle. Would be the same effect, but I lean more towards the circle suggestion.
Okay, Simo, oh, no, you're the one who's been speaking. Anyone have other suggestions or like either of Simo's suggestion?
I was thinking that, yeah, so about those numbers and not information about there is new content. I'm wondering how that content gets how the content is marked old, because I think in some, I'm mostly thinking about Android applications. So sometimes it's really annoying that when you try to check everything that's new, you still can't get rid of the notification that there is something new, and it's not always clear how to kind of make it not show some things as new, marking everything red, but red as having been red, not as color red. And then I think the bell is too small to have a number in it. It would be way too small. And usually it's not the best idea to have only color to signify something. So I'm thinking circle with number would be, I think, the clearest option.
Okay. A couple of us have dropped off. Aaron, what do you think about the circled number? Do you think that would be clearer to you?
Yeah, I think if it's so, the way I was imagining it, I think what Ralph was getting at was we completely replaced the bell icon with like a circle and a number, and I think that would be if we imagine that the number inside the circle is more or less the same size as text as the word announcements, then I think that would be that would be clear. What we want to do is just make sure the contrast is clear. So if we did, for instance, a white number, we would want to make sure that the red around it is is dark enough to where the white stands out. And the difficulty I suppose we have is the fact that the toolbar background is also black. So we would I guess there would be some thought would need to be put in to make sure we've got the right contrasting going on there. It might even be that we simply, instead of having a red sort of a red circle, which we basically will have like red, which can be quite a strong color, white and black, all of those different sort of colors working together or against each other. Maybe we simply keep it as black and white. So maybe the number is just white and that's all that's there, or maybe it's a black number surrounded by a white circle. I think we could probably do that. That might be even clear. That might be clearer actually from a contrast perspective. So if we did that, I guess what I'm saying is definitely some thought and consideration would need to be put into how exactly it was implemented.
Okay, so some alternatives, instead of putting the number in a circle, just have the number white on black, or a white circle or box with the number inside it in black.
Yeah, or even just the number in white text with like an outline around it, like a circle outline in white, or a square outline. The thing we have to be careful again here is that when it comes to the contrasting, if you think of like the number, if the number is black and it's surrounded by white, which is obviously a strong color, which is then surrounded by black, sometimes the black number might even completely disappear for some users, because of how strong the white is surrounded by black. So yeah, definitely need some thought into exactly what the most accessible thing would be there. But yeah, we've got options for sure.
And Ralph is giving a thumbs up to this. My question, if we have something like 5 announcements replacing the bell, that doesn't make it clear that that's 5 new announcements. How do we indicate that there are that the number we're providing is the number of new announcements rather, or unread announcements, rather than the total number?
Could you click the announcements again, please, to see what's available there? Thank you. And one question of curiosity, is it intended also to have some sort of categories for those announcements, or is it just one for everything, for security, for project messaging, for new releases and so forth? Or
I don't believe that it's categorized. It's just a list of announcements. Some of them can be marked as sticky to go at the top of the list. But other than that, it's just most recent first. Limited to 10 or so.
I think as I understand it, and I'm trying to think back because there's been a lot of discussion over the years, the idea is that we want to intentionally curate when these announcements show up, so that the most we're maybe talking like once every month or once every 2 months. So yeah, talking like, key releases, maybe DrupalCon. I believe there was a suggestion that maybe you could, at some point, you could personalize the feed. Like if you're really interested in like events in your country, for instance, you could say, okay, show me specifically this information. I have a vague memory of that being discussed, but I think there's definitely the intention was to, not overload this with everything, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I'm pretty sure there's a follow-up issue once the initial implementation is done, to allow people to customize the feed. But for the initial release, the plan is to fix it as the feed controlled by the Drupal Association. And as you say, they will be careful not to overload people with too many announcements. I think this question about indicating the new announcements and how many new announcements supports what we started off saying, that this is really not the best interface, that a dashboard would give us more room to indicate that there are new announcements. But that said, I'd still like to see if there are any other suggestions for how we can distinguish between, if you say 3 announcements, how do we convey the information that actually means 3 new announcements?
So I think the benefit we have is that now I'm trying to count backwards in my head. How long have we had smartphones for? 10, 15, 12 years? When did the iPhone come out? 2007? I don't know. We've as a a collective, as a community of humans, we've become collectively used to the idea that if you see a little bubble with a number in it, that means new things. And if there's nothing in, like you get a notification on your phone, right? And you look and you see a little bubble with an icon in it, and it says 3 things. You're like, okay, that's 3 new things that have just come in. So I think it's probably, to the vast majority of people, it's probably quite self-explanatory that a circle or a square with a number in it probably means, in this context, particularly next to the word announcements, probably means like, oh, there's 3 new things here. And I think also once you go in and you've looked at those, and then that, circle with a number in it disappears, you immediately are like, okay, I've read those. When there's a new one that comes in, I'll get another circle with a number in it. I actually think we have the benefit of, we're so used to that experience that we probably don't need to worry about that so much, compared to where if we were doing something, completely brand new here.
So for that visual cue, is it important for the number to be in a circle or something? If we just had white text on black for the number, would that be as clear?
I think the circle is more of a convention. So it's usually in a circle.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that's probably right. Like if we had it in a circle, it would be really obvious what we're trying to convey, I think. And for, obviously we want to make sure there's that makes sense for in non-visual situations. So we might do the normal where we have like, in a hidden span, we have next to it, like, say it's 3 in a circle, next it would be like, 3 unread, and then the next word is announcements. So to a screen reader, that would be 3 unread announcements.
Although the ideal is to make the screen reader experience as consistent as possible with the visual experience.
Right.
But I guess the visual indication is the fact that it's surrounded by a color, and the screen reader experience is that we add the word new. And that's the best we can do.
Yeah. Just to also briefly touch on the sort of dashboard idea, because we have definitely come a long way since the days of, Drupal 6, Drupal 7, where the dashboard there was completely like custom implementation. And I've been involved off and on some discussions around, the dashboard idea in recent versions of, Drupal 9, Drupal 10. And it's clear now that we're in a position now where we have things like layout builder and core. We've got like, we're in a much stronger place to make a dashboard that's much more maintainable, and actually we could be done much quicker than when the days of like Drupal 6 or 7, where we didn't have any of this existing technology for layouts in core. So the idea of bringing back a dashboard is not as crazy as some people might first think, because I think we could do it you could actually, like, if you really wanted to, as a site builder, you could make a content type called dashboard, stick a bunch of blocks in a layout, save it as like with the path /admin/dashboard or something, stick it on the toolbar, and there you have a dashboard. Or equally, we could just do that in the standard profile, and that's all we need, right? We don't actually need to. But what I'm saying is, we've got all the tools in core already. We just need to piece them together. So, I think the barrier to entry for putting this in the dashboard is actually quite low. It's just the will to do it.
That's right. And I think we talked some time ago about doing exactly that for the Umami demo profile.
Right.
There was maybe some objection that Umami should only use stable modules, and one of the modules that we were considering using was not stable. But if that was Layout Builder, it must have been a long time ago, because Layout Builder has been stable for quite some time.
Yeah, these discussions have been around for a number of years, so yeah, for sure, yeah.
and Umami would be really a good provide good context for that, because it has editors and administrators and and content moderation, maybe content. So content editors want to have their the content they're responsible for available to them on some sort of a dashboard. So that would be a really good use case for a content dashboard that, as you say, we can implement with the tools Drupal already provides us. And coming back to the announcements, I think that the natural way to make announcements available to a dashboard, when we do get around to making a dashboard, or if you make it yourself, is to provide some views integration, so that someone designing a dashboard with Layout Builder and blocks can create a block using views and stick it on the dashboard. So yeah, since the dashboard isn't there yet, I'm willing to call that a follow-up issue, rather than a requirement for getting it into core. Or maybe even they're talking about bringing this in as an experimental module. Maybe make this feature request a requirement for stable, that it have views integration. What do you think of that? Ralph, go ahead.
At first, a +1 from my end to the views integration. That's a good idea. And just also in the context of the dashboard and that announcements module, the work that is done on the announcements isn't lost or worthless. Nevertheless, even so, if a dashboard integration is coming, because from my point of view, that module for announcements could be used at a later point then, when the other solution is there. to be utilized for example, modules that provide on-site notifications like Danze or something like that. So they could save the work on the integration and interface, and announcements in regards of the site are way more in line, could work also in the dashboard, but are also way more useful in such a sidebar view that something happened that is more relevant to the site builder or administrator. And there are other modules aside Danze that could be used that as well. So the work wouldn't be lost.
Yeah, and that will work well with the other plans for future improvements, like making the feed configurable.
Yep.
Aaron, go ahead.
Thanks. It's a really, it's a really interesting way of thinking about it. Just for instance, if the announcements module actually just provided the plot like a pluggable backend in Drupal core, take like an organization that has maybe 1,000, 10,000 Drupal sites and that many editors, they could provide their own backend, plugin that provides announcements, related to their sites. Like maybe there's a major update that they're rolling out across all the sites. Having a method to facilitate that could be quite useful. And again, we've got the plugin API in core that could pretty easily facilitate that architecture. I realize we're kind of moving away from usability into more of like a product side, but it is a really interesting way of looking at it. Like we don't the announcements module in core doesn't even necessarily need to provide its own front end. It underpins, provides the views integration, provides maybe a view and a block out of the box. Yeah, it could be really powerful even just doing that.
So I'm just checking the follow-up issues. I know they've certainly talked about future enhancement of making the feed configurable. I don't see it listed as a related issue. But Aaron, for what you're suggesting, doesn't the existing structure and that recommendation for future feature request to make the feed configurable, wouldn't that be enough for the use case you were just describing?
It might be, but there would have to be a decision made right from the start, because it's kind of an architectural decision to say we're going to make this pluggable and you can provide your own announcement feeds, versus this only has one feed from Drupal.org, and the user can configure it to say I want to see things from, or the site can configure it to say I want to see like events from by location or something. Like I think those are two different questions, and even if the ability to add additional sources is not there in an MVP, it's still something that has to be part of that roadmap from the start, because it's a very different way of architecting it, if that makes sense.
I don't see that it's a very different way of architecting it. Presumably in the future version, you'll have a configuration page and you'll say, enable this feed, fill in the URL of the feed, give a label to that. So maybe maybe the only architectural change that might need to be made is that, anticipating that there will be more than one feed in the future, we should add something to the JSON from the not even the JSON from the feed, but just the the render element or whatever that gets passed around in Drupal. Some piece of information that can identify which of the enabled feeds this comes from.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking like it's, again, I don't want to go technical, but we're already down that rabbit hole. So like, there's a kind of in my head, I'm thinking, okay, on one hand, if we say this is just a configuration, right, and you can turn on and off the elements of what's coming from Drupal.org, right, that is as simple as a simple piece of configuration in Drupal. Whereas if we want to say in the future, like now or in the future, you could provide different sources, then we're talking about the plugin API and configuration entities, right? So that's what I'm kind of getting at. And obviously, we can, we have update hooks. We can make those changes. We don't have to do that right at the start. An MVP doesn't necessarily have to provide a plugin and a config entity. That's fine. I think it's useful for that decision to be made early on, that this is something we want to support versus this is something we don't want to support, kind of thing.
Yeah, I guess when you're talking about a plugin, you're going for a level of flexibility that is sort of beyond what your use case requires. And just having allowing multiple feeds and just specifying the structure that the feed has to produce is enough to support the use case you suggested. That's what it seems to me.
Yeah, and I guess in Drupal terms, my go-to would be, okay, we store those, we store those in config entities. We have a plugin that allows you to store that, that feed URL and some arbitrary configuration for it. Again, we really don't need to get into those technical details here. That's not why we're here. But I guess it's something that it can at least say there's potential for that use case. And I think it's, everything we do in Drupal is designed to be pluggable and be buildable. And certainly what we're talking about really would mean that this becomes another part of that ethos. The idea that this module becomes a building block you can use alongside other things like views and blocks. I think that really supports that idea.
Okay, so Ralph is giving a thumbs up to that. Although I'm going to say that's an important consideration, but it is still outside the scope of usability.
I guess the one thing we can talk about, because we touched on it earlier, is does it make sense to provide this like announcements icon on the toolbar and the thing that pops out initially, and then when the dashboard's ready, provide whatever we need to do for the dashboard, versus making the dashboard a prerequisite? Because there's an argument that like if users see this and get used to it, then it becomes harder to just rip that out later. So maybe we should make a recommendation from the start that says either we're okay with this being a thing that pops out from side, or we think that it should be done in a dashboard. Because like I said earlier, the barrier to entry for adding a dashboard now is pretty low, So I don't think it's much of a stretch.
So I guess you're revisiting the question I asked at the start, whether we should nix this approach because it somehow blocks the preferred approach of using a dashboard. Is that what you're saying?
I think that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just worried that like if we if we say, oh yeah, let's go ahead and add it as it is, like that's fine. But then when it comes to saying, when we have a dashboard, I worry that then we have to make the decision to keep it or remove it as it is. And if we keep it, then we ultimately still have the same problem, that there's this, what I would say, kind of awkward announcements button on the toolbar. And I would just be more comfortable with us saying, let's just do it as part of a dashboard from the start, because then that's what people get used to seeing it in, and it's less work to have to redo it all later.
And it's funny. I wonder how much overlap is there between this module and the aggregator module. And we just decided that we were going to get rid of the aggregator module, which is designed for bringing data into Drupal from external sources, which is what this is doing. I haven't used aggregator much. Does it have views integration?
I have a funny feeling it does. But I think there was also some other, like I think aggregator had some technical debt, maybe.
Okay.
I mean, that said, it doesn't stop us from bringing aggregator back in another form. Like if this is a motivation for bringing it back in, then.
And I guess, going along with what you were saying about how we should design things in core so that they're extendable and can be used with other things and in unanticipated ways. Managing the feed, that's already done by aggregator. That brings the data into Drupal. Then all you need is to decide how you're going to display that information. Are you going to add it to the toolbar as this does? Or are you going to add it to the dashboard, which doesn't exist yet?
And you could also argue that there's, the feeds module in Contrib is a better, more modern implementation of what aggregator essentially did. I mean, I haven't used it much, so I can't say for sure, but that's my understanding of it.
And in the chat, Ralph mentions that the aggregator module does seem to have views integration from a quick look at the code. So Aaron is thinking about going back to the decision made several months ago that we really shouldn't implement this because it sort of makes it harder to get to the preferred solution, which is the dashboard. But earlier in this meeting, we sort of had consensus that it's okay to have this interim solution. Ralph, Simo, what do you feel about that?
I kind of like that to have announcements in the toolbar, but that's not for like that because if it's something that the clients could have input in, like if it would be something that could be used for different kinds of announcements, because so it's kind of a I'm thinking about kind of having distinction between high priority announcements and low priority announcements. So in that way, having a possibility to display them in a very very prominent place or very highly visible place would have would have a benefit. But with the current content, I think it might be better to go directly with the kind of a dashboard thing. But I think that's something that could be quite useful for to have a possibility to do that, but not as default.
The possibility to do what? To have it in the toolbar?
Yeah, because I think it could be, I can see use cases where it would be like where it would be useful to have it in a place where you can't, like where you see it all the time.
Yeah, remember the whole reason for this is that we want to push announcements on people who are not yet involved with Drupal. And for that to work, we pretty much have to make it the default. So
Yeah.
I think the people running this project would be very unhappy if we made a strong recommendation that it not be the default. So I guess when I leave a comment, I will say that when we talked about it before, the recommendation was not to move forward with this. And that we've somewhat softened on that in this meeting, but we still have some concern. Go ahead, Ralph.
One thought. I see definitely Aaron's point that going with the interim solution and people get used to it, and then it gets removed and moved over to the dashboard, the upcoming, then it might be problematic. But if maybe the label for the icon would be rethought and you go instead of announcement with something more neutral, and which makes it more open to the repurposing at a later point for other solutions, as well as for the option to include the ability to have other feeds as well. So maybe the announcements for Drupal.org related are moved to the dashboard, but maybe the company internals announcement channel stays there, or yeah, maybe. I'm still think it might be not that much of a bad idea to go with an interim solution, but maybe just make it a bit more easier transitionable and mind the wording a bit to make that transition at a later point easier, even in case if people get used to it.
Okay, I would suggest that if we want to do that, we do that after it's experimental and in core, and at the same time that we implement the option for multiple feeds. At that point, we would address that sort of question. Does that sound like the right timing to you?
Yes.
I'm also thinking that, like, practically speaking, not much has happened on this in a while. I mean, at least as far as I can tell, because I do follow that issue and I haven't really seen much movement on it. You know, given that, is it like more likely that just organically the dashboard idea is going to happen before this? That's, I mean, the dashboard's idea hasn't made much progress either, but like my gut feeling is that one's definitely easier in the context of where we are now, is easier to implement, and potentially if a few people got around that one, that would be a lot easier to happen before this. Because like I said, you're literally just, to a certain extent, just piecing pieces of code together to make it work. So I guess I'm thinking like, in the reality of it is like, the dashboard might even exist before this even comes into core, you know?
That'll only happen if someone makes it happen, which could be some of us. We're getting close to the end of the hour. Any closing remarks? Okay, I will post a comment to this issue. If you have been following it, Aaron, I hope you noticed that I re-rolled it for Drupal 10.1, got the tests to pass again.
I might have done.
I'm gonna say I probably did.
It's been in the last week or two. I think the
Okay.
last week.
Yeah, I
Okay.
have a vague memory of seeing it in my feed.
Okay. Thank you all for coming. Thanks for this discussion. I think that the Drupal Association would really like to see this happen. And they need our approval because usability is a core gate. And of course, they'll need the release manager's approval. So we'll see what happens, but I think we should move forward on this. I would also love to move forward on a dashboard. We discussed that some time ago. I did sort of a first draft of something, I think, for Umami. But we are at the top of the hour. So again, thanks all for coming, and we'll do it again next week.
Thanks.
Thanks, bye.
Thank you. Bye.